It's funny. Sometimes the arguments that sound the most logical, the most airtight, are the very ones holding us back the most. I'm Priya, and let me tell you, I learned this the hard way. It turns out my own brain was an expert liar, and its favorite weapon was logic. This right here, this was the very first thought that hit me when I got my big promotion. Not joy, not excitement, just this cold, sinking feeling of dread. I'd worked my tail off for years for this exact moment, and all my brain had to offer was this voice telling me I was a fraud. And the craziest part? It felt completely, undeniably true. I definitely did. It was like I was trapped in a courtroom with this brilliant lawyer who was just systematically dismantling my confidence. And that lawyer was winning. So this is my story, the story of how I discovered that my own logical reasoning was actually this incredibly sophisticated trap I'd been setting for myself for years. Now here's what's so sneaky about it. It all felt so reasonable. My brain laid it out like a mathematical proof. Premise A, I know every single one of my flaws and insecurities. Premise B, my bosses, well, they don't see all that. Conclusion, therefore, my success is based on incomplete information. It has to be a fluke. It seemed like a perfectly sound argument, but it was leading me right into a spiral of anxiety. Okay, so this is the part that changed everything for me. I stumbled across a term for this little trick my brain was playing on me. And it wasn't logic at all. It was something called contamination. And I swear, learning about it felt like someone finally switched on the lights in a pitch black room. So it all boils down to this idea that we're all kind of operating with three parts of ourselves. There's the parent, which is like a library of all the rules and shoulds we've picked up. Then there's the child, which holds all our deep-seated feelings and fears from growing up. And finally, there's the adult, our rational, here and now thinking self. Contamination, that's when the parent or the child sneaks into the adult's office and starts passing off these old, dusty files as if they're today's breaking news. Here's a great way to think about it. Picture your adult mind as a super advanced water purifier. Its job is to give you clear, objective data about the world. But what if old parent prejudices or child fears are like rust and dirt that have gotten into the pipes? You go to get a drink of what you think is pure, logical water, but you're actually gulping down your own unprocessed biases and anxieties, and you don't even taste the difference. So once I understood what was happening, I had to figure out the where. Where was this murky water coming from? Turns out, there are two main culprits, and learning to tell their voices apart was the next huge step in cleaning up my own thinking. And what's wild is just how different these two voices are. Parent contamination, it sounds like absolute law. It's the voice of shoulds, of everyone knows that, of cultural rules that we just absorbed without question, all presented like they're facts of nature. Child contamination, though, that's the voice of fear. It takes old feelings from when we were small and dresses them up as a totally logical risk assessment for the future. It's what leads to that worst-case scenario thinking. Let's look at a real-world example of parent contamination. A guy named Suresh, he thought his explosive anger was just him, upholding principles. His internalized parent voice was telling him that standing up for what's right demanded this aggressive response. So his rational adult mind got totally contaminated, and what was really unmanaged rage felt, to him, like perfectly logical, principled integrity. It was just a rule disguised as reason. And then you have Mira's story, which is just such a powerful example of child contamination. Her childhood fear of her mother's disapproval got blown up into an absolute catastrophe. If I tell her who I really am, the shock will literally kill her. Now, this wasn't based on any medical fact. It was her terrified inner child leaking into her adult brain, turning a deep-seated fear into what felt like a logical life-or-death calculation.
And right then, reading that, it just clicked for me. My whole logical conclusion that I was a fraud, that was my child voice, loud and clear. That old, deep-down fear from when I was a kid, the one that whispered, "You're not good enough," had put on a business suit, learned some corporate jargon, and was passing itself off as a rational adult assessment of my career. It was a ghost from my past, pretending it could predict my future.
So, okay, understanding the mechanics of this is one thing, but seeing the real-world consequences, well, that's what really makes you want to change. This contaminated thinking isn't just some quirky personality trait. It's like a heavy anchor that keeps us stuck in the mud, totally unable to move forward. And here's why it's such a perfect, vicious trap. It makes your oldest, most limiting beliefs feel like cold, hard facts. It makes any kind of positive change feel incredibly dangerous, like in Mira's case, or just plain wrong, like in Suresh's. It completely blinds you to any other way of seeing things.
But the most insidious part, it gives you a rational justification for staying stuck. It literally makes self-sabotage feel like the smartest, most responsible choice you could possibly make.
All right, so if our logic is contaminated, how on earth do we fix it? The good news is it's not about trying to argue with yourself or just think positive. It's more like becoming a detective for your own thoughts, learning to separate the clean data from the gunk. It's about decontamination. So this became my personal toolkit, the 4 things I started to do. First, I'd question any thought that sounded absolute. I can't. I always, everyone knows. Then I'd ask, whose voice is this really? Is it my rational adult thinking, or is it an echo from my past? The third step was a total game changer, consciously separating what I was feeling from what was fact. And finally, instead of just believing my doomsday predictions, I'd run tiny, safe experiments in the real world. Let me show you exactly how I use that third step. I would literally say this out loud to myself. Okay, I feel like a total imposter, that is a feeling, and the fact is my last 3 performance reviews have been great and I totally nailed that last project. By holding the feeling and the fact in my mind at the same time and not letting the feeling poison the feeling just started to lose its power. It was still there, sure, but it wasn't masquerading as reality anymore. And that's really what this whole process is about. It's not about creating a life with 0 fear or getting rid of those old voices forever. They might never totally go away. It's about something way more powerful, the freedom that comes from finally seeing things clearly. At the end of the day, this isn't about becoming a feelingless robot. It's just about awareness. It's about spotting the disguise. The fear of not being good enough is just that, a feeling. But when that fear puts on a logic costume and starts pulling out charts and graphs to prove its case, that's when it becomes a debilitating belief. The whole goal is just to learn to see through that disguise. So, I'll leave you with this question to think about. What story, what perfectly sound, totally reasonable argument has your brain built that just so happens to keep you exactly where you are right now? Because spotting that lie, well, that's the very first step to telling yourself a new and much truer story.